Right, I think we're now live, George. So behave yourself. And welcome to the Comraich tasting we've got going tonight. So it's something a bit different. We tried to do a few different things, I guess, over COVID initially when it started, however long that was ago. But we've done various tastings, whether it's with spirit or different releases. We've done our core range or limited range. But this time it's with our Comraich, and it's probably something that a lot of you aren't familiar with. It's not something we probably shout about too much because it's not a release that's for retail. You can't buy it in shops. You can't even buy it at the distillery. It's something that we did for bars around the world, and we wanted to team up with, I guess, people who've supported Kilchoman from the start. So there's been various bars around the world who've taken Kilchoman on board from day one, and they've followed the releases. They're hugely knowledgeable about the distillery and what we've done, and it was trying to team up with these bars and do a release for them that was special. You could only get from these bars and get people drinking Kilchoman as much as possible, really. So these Comraich releases were born out of that, and I guess the name Comraich is probably slightly unusual as well. This was born out of the Kilchoman Church. So if you've been to Kilchoman, which hopefully some of you have, I'm seeing some of the comments come in from. I recognise some of the names. Hans Peter, I recognise you, of course. Kilchomania group. So please comment in with any questions you've got as well on throughout the session. But the Comraich comes from the Kilchoman Church. So up beside Kilchoman, if you come visit us, you go not much more than a few hundred meters, maybe half a mile down the road, across the barley fields towards Mackay Bay, you'll find Kilchoman Church, and there's 3 sanctuary stones around this church, which in Gaelic is Comraich. So that is directly translates as sanctuary stones. And the story goes that back in medieval times, if you were within the boundaries of these sanctuary stones around the church, you were safe from harm, harassment, arrest. You were protected by the church effectively. And we thought this was quite a good idea for what bars we wanted to team up with, because effectively what we want is you to go into a Comraich bar, have a dram at Kilchoman, forget the outside world. I can't guarantee you're safe from arrest or harassment in these bars, so don't get too excited. But essentially, we wanted a sanctuary away from the outside world, forget about the issues, have a little dram at Kilchoman, and that's the sort of environment we wanted for these bars. So that's where the idea came from, and we've done now a series of releases. We've got, I think it's just over 100 bars around the world. Obviously, there's maybe 15 in China, and there's 10 in America, and there may be 2 in Germany, wherever it may be. You can have a look on our website. If you go to the Comraich page on our website, if you scroll down to the bottom, there's a map, and you can find where your nearest Comraich bar is. And we've tried to make sure they're stocked up with Kilchoman, so don't worry, you can have plenty of Kilchoman drams, which are limited releases, the core range. But the big thing is obviously the reason we're here tonight is these 4 Comraich drams, which is only available in these bars. So as I said, we don't sell them retail anywhere in the world. You can only get them from here. So have a look on the website, find your local bar, and have a dram if you need one. But I believe George is going to take us through the number 1 Comraich, which was done. When was this done? This was
2017.
2017, yeah.
That was when the Comraich bars were launched in 2017. And back in 2017, we probably predominantly releasing maybe 7, 8-year-old whiskies, whether that be our limited releases or single casks. And we felt it was important, especially for the first Comraich batch 1, was to do something that was probably older than we'd released to date. So this is a vatting of 3 casks from 2007. So you've got 2 bourbon barrels. I'm gonna have to read the numbers because I can't remember them. So they're cask 146 from 2007, 265 from 2007. And then there's also an Oloroso sherry butt in there as well from 2007, which is 419. So it's sort of, as far as a marriage of Kilchoman casks, it's a fairly typical Kilchoman marriage of 3 casks in the respects you've got the bourbon and the sherry in there. And for me, what you really get from this is not only the typical Kilchoman character of the peat, the floral quality, and that little bit of maritime sweetness, but because we're now getting that little bit more age with these drams, you get a little bit more of that sort of complex vanilla character coming through as well. And it was important that when we do these comrades that they have the Kilchoman range in the bars, and then also they get a chance to have these drams, and making them only available in these bars has been a success. And I think it was actually an idea that Peter came up with, which was
I'm full of good ideas. So
full of good ideas. But no, and also we've got to say that all the drams that we're going to have this evening are at cask strength, so they're all 55% or slightly more. So don't be afraid to add a few drops of water to these, especially at that higher ABV. But you definitely get the Kilchoman characteristic coming in there. A little bit more sort of horizontal flavor profile, a little bit more oil, a little bit more wax on the inside of the cheeks. Pete finds that quite amusing.
I'm just curious about the horizontal profile.
Well, so you get it more on your cheeks rather than sometimes with the bourbon barrels, it's slightly more. You don't have so much oil on the inside of your cheeks, I find, and a little bit more weight in there. And we're drinking this at 55.5% ABV, and it's just unbelievably light and fresh. Also, we're up at the higher level of the peating, so we're going to have, out of the 4 drams we're tasting this evening, 3 of them are at the 50 ppm, which is our commercial malt, and then we're tasting one from our own barley, which is grown at Rockside Farm at the distillery. These 2007 casks, there's not a huge amount of them. Back when we first started producing in 2005, for those of you who aren't aware, Kilchoman opened in 2005, and we were only producing up until 2009 under 100,000 litres. So the stock levels that we have from 2007 aren't huge. We were also sold some private casks in that time, so it makes this even more rare. And yes, it's only 10 years of age, but those of you who follow Kilchoman and tasted Kilchoman through the sort of since then, you'll see that the main thing is that Kilchoman we've got that fantastic light floral sweet style of spirit. And as far as casks, we buy our bourbon barrels from Buffalo Trace in Kentucky and our sherry cask from Miguel Martin. And you get this amazing quality of wood, and our delicate spirit, yes, it is peated, but I think you'll all agree that the peat in there is on the lighter style. It's not that big, direct peat you sometimes get in the back of your throat. You really get this nice, rich roundness to it. And those of you who might have tasted some Kilchomans at home, maybe it's a Maccabee. If you were tasting a Maccabee, this is a similar makeup as far as casks as the bourbon and sherry influence, but just that little bit more age in there, and you get that little bit more complex character. But I'm just going to add a couple of drops of water just to see what happens to that.
It's nice to see quite a few on. There's a mix of certainly a lot of German fans coming on board, and there's a couple from North Yorkshire, which is nice, and Inverness and Fife and everything. So we've got a few on board. But let us know what you think of the drams as they come in, because it's not something you might have tried before. Obviously, some may have been into the local Comraich, but if you've not tried it before, this might be a first sort of dip into the Comraich range that we do. And it's an ongoing process, so we'll keep releasing these. And I said we've got 4 batches now, a 5th one coming up in a not too distant future that we're just sort of bottling at the moment. So we'll keep trying to do slightly different things, but generally speaking, as George said, it's some of the rarer casks we've got from 07. There's not a huge amount of stock left because we only produced a very small amount at the very beginning of Kilchoman. And that's what we want to sort of bring to these whiskies really is I guess a typical Kilchoman style. We don't usually do anything wildly different with the Comraich batches. They're not sort of in hugely experimental casks or some of these things we do like port and Madeira and lower ABV or maybe a higher peating level, whatever. They're usually the standard Kilchomans, because that's what we want to get across in these whiskies is those sort of cask strength Kilchomans, whether it's bourbon or Oloroso sherry, and how good they can come across. So I think this one in particular is great.
Yeah, no, it's fun. I mean, a lot of people saying herbal, floral, and the bourbon dominating. Definitely for me, that little few drops of water that I put in there, you really open up the creaminess of it. That creaminess, you get a little bit of spice in there from the Oloroso sherry but the nice creaminess coming through. So yeah, this was the first one that we did, and it was extremely popular. And then we went round and did tastings in these bars and tried to get people. I think it was great for us to work with bars rather than shops in this style, and it's not been quite as easy recently, but it's always nice to go into these bars when we're abroad or in the UK.
Yeah, not so much Comraich being drunk in the last couple of years, but we do have it. If you come visit us at Kilchoman, we do have it available at the bar there as well to have a dram of and have a taste. So we were fortunate enough to make ourselves a Comraich, so we were generous in that aspect. But equally, if you're listening and you are a bar and you do sell because from Kilchoman and you're fans of us, then get in touch. And there's no exact criteria, as long as you're passionate about whiskey and you liking Kilchoman is obviously a prerequisite. But if you're passionate about whiskey, you've got a bar and you want to have a Comraich release and be a Comraich bar, then get in touch and we'll see if we can work together. I
also say if you've got the opportunity to have 4 glasses in front of you, it's always quite nice to be able to go back to them and try them after they've been in the glass for a little while. But no, I think as far as a Kilchoman expression, I think that if it's got everything that you'd expect from a cask strength Kilchoman, that very, very approachable character at 55% is something that always shines through with our single cask. And a lot of it's down to not only the quality of the spirit that the guys at the distillery distill, but the wood that we've been able to fill into. Back in 2005, when it was selecting casks, it was a great thing that we were able to do is work with Buffalo Trace and then Miguel Martin to get that quality of wood. Because it's so important, especially when you're drinking relatively young peaty whiskies at cask strength.
Yeah, just a few comments coming on the taste. So Mark's there saying that it's more herbal than floral and bourbon dominated. So he's a fan of that, obviously. And a bit of damp bonfire ash with a bit of red licorice, which comes through. I guess that's some of that sweetness coming through. Aaron Hans-Peter, of course, you remember in Limburg, apparently I was out there, that must have been quite a few years ago now, out in Limburg doing the opening of the Comraich there. Hopefully I did a decent tasting and you enjoyed it. I trust that anyway. Hopefully you say that now anyway. No negative comments allowed.
Yeah. Yes, the artisan is a Comraich, and actually Antea, a colleague of ours, was doing a tasting there last night. It's always good doing a tasting at the artisan because you get well looked after by Derek and Fiona, and they give you 3 courses of food. So it's always a great crowd in Wishaw. Yeah, it's something I go for regularly. Pete.
I was going to say 3 courses of food, George. It sounds right up your street.
Yes, yeah.
If you didn't catch it, unfortunately we weren't live, but George had a couple of bags of crisps before we got on here just to keep himself stocked up before we got here. But anyway, now George has finished on the food topic. We can maybe move on to batch 2. And as I said, it was a theme with the Comraichs. We didn't want to do too many wild different things. We didn't want to do all these experimental casts and this, that, and the other. We wanted the Comraichs to very much be a real, I guess, standard bearer for what Kilchoman is and what we want to do and our sort of signature style of whiskey. So the batch 2 is along those sort of lines, and I guess the interesting thing with this is we chose consecutive casks for batch 2. So it was 206, 207, 208 of 2011. So 2011 we bottled this as an 8-year-old whiskey. So as 8-year-old, all fresh bourbon barrels as well. So as George mentioned, we get them from Buffalo Trace, and each distillery may fill fresh barrels, or they may fill them second, third, fourth, fifth time. But something we wanted to create at Kilchoman, and I say it was mostly our dad's idea at the start. He wanted a young, fresh, full of character whiskey. Basically, we didn't want to. He was never aiming for, right, let's make the best 18, 20, 30-year-old whiskey and let's aim for that. He wanted something young, fresh, and full of character. So we fill a large percentage of what we do into first fill fresh barrels, and that means basically it comes from Buffalo Trace. These 3 bourbon barrels in this dram come from Buffalo Trace. They're sort of wet with bourbon on the inside, and we fill them straight up with our spirit. So day one, they're taking on that character, and I think that's what comes across in this, where it's 55.3%, 8-year-old fresh bourbon. You might be expecting a bit of punch and kick, and it certainly does have that at cask strength. But I think the great thing with Kilchoman at cask strength is it doesn't have too much bite. It's not too harsh or aggressive. It has a bit of power, but it's character that's comes through. It's that vanilla. It's that real citrus, lemon, orange sort of peel. That sort of character comes through a huge amount, and it is peated. But again, as George mentioned, it's not an earthy sort of heavy peat. It's more of that sort of light smoke. As Hansby is mentioning there, that citrus really comes through an awful lot, and it's a balance for me on the finish of a sort of salty light smoke, and the sweetness really comes through, and it's a long finish. It doesn't stop this dram really. You get it going, and it's then the sweetness comes back, and then a bit more of the floral nature, then the peat, and then so it keeps on developing a long time, this dram.
I think especially with batch 1 was you had a bit more weight to it, and then with this all with the fresh bourbon, it's quite light and almost sort of especially that citrus note really does, for me especially on the nose, you get that huge amount of citrus vanilla coming through. So
I think
it's
that's
nice. It's also, pardon.
No, I wouldn't want to interrupt you, George.
No, well, you did. So no, I was just saying that it's always quite interesting, especially with the first 2 we've tasted there. The only difference is that the first one had a little bit of the sherry influence, and the second one here is all those fresh bourbon, and the nose is just vastly different with those the sherry influence coming through on the nose of the first one, and this one's got that lovely freshness to it.
As you mentioned, that weight of the sherry adds to the first one, where you get a bit more weight to it. It almost comes in a bit heavier, more viscous, and carries through. Whereas this one, it's all about those light fresh fruits, really. Light fresh fruits and vanilla is what you're getting mostly here. And depending on how often you drink Islay whiskey is probably depending on how much peat you're getting through and how much smoke you're getting coming through. But for me, it's Kilchoman's never been a big earthy sort of peat bomb or peat monster, really. It's always been that sort of smoke there, definitely an Islay whiskey, but it's not ever going to dominate the flavour. It's not going to dominate the dram. You're always going to get those other sort of lighter flavours coming through, and a lot of that comes from long fermentation. It comes from the stills, the sort of small stills that we've got, the tall, thin nature of them, and a lot of aspects that add into it. But I think always Kilchoman, no matter what cask it's been in, what strength it's at, it's that fresh fruit comes through on almost every cask type.
And the bourbon barrels make up the majority of what we fill in the warehouse. We are filling more sherry, and we've got, as Peter mentioned, some experimental casks that we fill into experimental wine casks. But those bourbon barrels make up the core of, the majority of what is in our warehouse. We do have some refills, so we do have casks that we've used, say for Comraich Batch 1 and 2, that would have been then refilled again with our spirit. And those ones we'll be able to lay down for slightly longer without the cask influence coming in so quickly. But our father, his favourite is bourbon cask matured, so it's a great example of us at cask strength there, especially.
And I'm glad there, Mark, you're mentioning that. The girls at the distillery wouldn't sell you a bottle that was on display. That's good news, because I'm sure you tried to convince them, but unfortunately it's only available in the Comraich bars, and you can't buy a full bottle. Well, you never know. I'm sure the odd bottle slips through the net somewhere and goes onto some auction site somewhere. But the idea with this is that it's only available by the dram. You can't buy a full bottle. So I hope you enjoy the dram at the distillery. Maybe in Limburg, there's hopefully still got a few batches there that you can have a taste of at some point.
But anyone who's been to the distillery in the last, since the early days and hasn't been for a while, you'll notice a huge difference. We were all, even though Peter and I aren't in the same place at the moment, we're not both on Islay. We were both on Islay yesterday and earlier this part of this week. And yeah, if you haven't been there since COVID and all that, then you'll notice a huge amount of difference of things that we've done. The new visitor centre, which has been opened, and now we're starting to put up some new warehouses as well, further back near the hill. So there's a lot of building work going on at the moment, which is very exciting. Warehousing is the main thing, because as we started with a small scale production in 2005, that production level has slowly creeped up. And then in 2019, we actually put in a second still house, an identical still house, which sits next to the first one with identical stills, identical mash tun. So that has meant that production has gone up to in the region of 400,000 litres this year, and that has meant that warehousing space is needed a little bit quicker than we probably anticipated 10 years ago. So it's great to have all our casks on Islay. It's something that our father was very keen to get be there, and also the bottling. So we've had a new bottling line put in recently as well, which means that because everything is bottled at Kilchoman, that means that we can get the orders through slightly quicker as well. So yeah, a lot of change. But the soup, everyone goes about the soup. It doesn't matter where you go, everyone talks about the
That's food again, George. That's interesting. It's weird you keep diverting it back to that. I thought we were talking
Maybe
about
I'm hungry. Maybe I'm hungry. That's why I had the crisps.
Keep focusing on the food. No wonder you enjoy doing the food pairings of charcuterie and what else do we do? We did the fish.
Chocolate.
Sorry?
Chocolate.
Yeah, you were first in line for those tastings.
I think I did
it's strange just having whiskey alone on its own.
If you've got any questions about whether it's about the drams we're tasting this evening, or drams that you've had of Kilchoman, or releases that you've tried, or anything you want to know about Kilchoman, do ask us, and we'll try our best to help you out, because it's important. We could sit here and probably take the mick out of each other for a while, but it's about you learning a little bit about Kilchoman, and also trying drams. And if you haven't got the tasting pack that we sent out, whether it's a bottle of our Maccabee or Saneg or any other releases that you've got of ours, do open it up and join in.
I think Mark there was suggesting some of the Kilchoman-ness, and it was what you're saying, George, there about our dad, preferring those bourbon casks. I think fresh bourbon, 8 to 12 years, it really does represent Kilchoman, as you said, the Kilchoman-ness, elegant, clean, that bourbon character with a bit of vanilla, but it's just fresh fruit and it's a real great balance. I think that's great, and coming through. And Christopher, you'll have to talk to our other brother on that one about tracking it down in New York. So George is the UK, and so he'll be able to tell you all about the Comraichs in the UK, I'm sure. And I tend to do a bit of Europe and go out to Asia. Sort of I go east, and James then does a bit of Europe and also goes west out to America. So you'll need to direct his question Christopher, you'll need to direct your question at James when you next see him.
Or you can email office@impexbev.com, which was a message that came in from Catherine there. So if you need to get a little bit more information, there are importers in America, and they'll be able to point you in the right direction and help you out with where you can track it down as well.
Yeah.
There you go, Pete. Loch Gorm, little question for you there. Loch Gorm.
So Loch Gorm, I guess, is part of the core range, very much so. So our core range, if you go on our website, you probably see the best example of it, where it's Maccabee and Saneg, which are the best known whiskies we're known for. They're always available. And then around that, there's two other whiskies that are our core range. 100% Islay, which is released once a year, annually, which is all barley from the farm. We take it through growing, malting, distillation, maturation, bottling. And then there's another released annually, which is Loch Gorm, which is the only one we do that's entirely matured in Oloroso sherry casks. And so we do that every year. So every spring we do a new release of Loch Gorm, and it's probably between 15 and 17,000 bottles that we do worldwide of that every year. The unfortunate thing is that we just, sadly, we don't produce enough. We don't have enough casks in the warehouse to do 3, 4, 5 releases that are always available throughout the year. We are a farm distillery. We don't have 10, 15 sets of stills that we produce millions of litres a year is the shame. So we do have to sort of have a lot of limited releases and try and manage our stock as best we can. So Loch Gorm, the idea is that maybe 5, 7, 8, 9 years down the road, we'll have it as part of the core range and always available. For now, I'm afraid you're going to have to try and sort of search that out. It's released every year and about 15,000 bottles.
Yeah, and those limited releases, Peter said, they're key to be able to protect our stocks. And also, there's a question there about age statements. What's our position on age statements? And when we started releasing whiskey as a 3-year-old, we've been doing non-age statement whiskies. We do put the age and the cask makeup for the limited releases. But as far as an age statement, there's no plan in the immediate future to release an age statement. But as we don't always make the decisions, we normally get told what we're going to be doing. But I think the main thing that we always look at is the quality of the liquid before it goes in the bottle. Being an independent distillery gives us full flexibility about how we feel a bottle if a release is ready to go. So if we don't feel the liquid is a true representation of Kilchoman, and especially as a lot of the releases we do may be only a vatting of 30 casks, it's very important that we take the best casks that marry well together. But we're not ruling out an age statement, but it won't be something that will come for a while.
Yeah. I think the key thing with that is the things like Loch Gorm and 100% Islay, we always put the casks that are put in the vatting on there. But it always seems a shame to put 9 years on the bottle and be an age statement when actually Loch Gorm, for instance, the last release we did had 9, 10, 11 and 13-year-old whiskey in there. So it's sort of transparency, but you're not being transparent if you put 9 on it in some way. So it's finding that balance, and what we like doing is probably blending different ages, different cask types together as much as anything. So age statements is something we're looking at, but as George said, it's really as we go. Our oldest whiskey so far is only 16 years old, and the bulk of our stock is a bit younger than that. So we're figuring out as we go. But I think lots of our small batches, limited releases, will all have age statements on them, and we'll try to be sort of as transparent as we can. But generally speaking, we like to blend different ages together a lot of the time, so it doesn't lend itself to age statements. George, why do you like such small tasting glasses? I think it's because George's idea. He's got very small hands. So he likes small tasting glasses, so it looks bigger in his hand. I think that's probably the main reason.
I think I'm not sure why you've got the same glasses. So
no, I think it was come out these urban bar tasting glasses, and I think it came out of the Glencairns are a great tasting glass. We use them a lot as well. We've got some tumblers that we now have branded, and we use in our gift packs, Macabear tumbler glasses. But essentially, I think for this, because it is a tasting session, is not so much as a sort of dram session where you pour a big full dram and have a sip for hours. The idea of this obviously is tasting relatively small amounts, but getting a feel for lots of different drams. So we felt the small glass was a bit more appropriate for that. But we'll stick to that for now. But you never know in the future. We might give you a bigger glass if you're lucky.
I think there's a question here that sort of leads us on now to the next one, batch number 3. So Kilchoman, for those who aren't aware, is located on Islay, and we're located on a farm, a working farm, where we not only have some Aberdeen Angus cattle and some sheep, we also grow, more importantly, we grow barley. And that barley we then take through the whole process at the distillery. We've got 2 clear different styles, I should say. So we've got what we've tasted so far, which we refer to as commercial malt, which is malted barley that we buy in from Port Ellen Maltings. And then we have our 100% Islay style, which is barley that we not only grow at the distillery, but then we malt on our malt floor before distilling, maturing and bottling, all on site. And when our father was looking to build the distillery, Islay was the obvious place for him. Probably already guessed by our very strong Islay accents that sort of family history. The mother's side of the family, my mum's side, our mother's side of the family are from Islay, and we were born down in Bristol before moving to Scotland in 1995, where we lived on the mainland near Carl's Butte, before moving over to Islay. And the reason Islay for building Kilchoman was Islay is famous throughout the world. You can mention Islay and people talk about whiskey and a fantastic style of whiskey. But it was important that when building the distillery, not only to produce a typical Islay style of whiskey, but we had a point of difference, that we were different, slightly different to the other ones. So that not only being smaller, but having the control over growing your own barley, not only the barley varieties that we grow, and that's something that we're experimenting with a lot more at the moment, whereas we'll split a field and we'll grow maybe Concerto or Diablo or Sassy barley in there to see how they all perform. But the one thing that we do as well with our own barley is we peat it to a lighter level. So we peat it to in the region of 20 parts per million. If you compare that to everything we've had so far, that was up at 50 parts per million. And that lighter peating level, really, you sort of tend to get a lot more of the maltiness coming out as well. And also it showcases the spirit quality, that lighter style. Growing barley on Islay, don't tend to get the biggest of grain. You sort of slightly smaller grain, therefore a little less spirit that comes from each batch of each ton of barley. But it does give you that very, very unique style, and it's unique to whiskey making. So it's something that we're very proud of. And I think the first thing that you will notice for me is it far softer on the nose, this one. So batch number 3 is a vatting of 3 casks again. So we've got 2 fresh bourbon barrels from 2008 and an Oloroso sherry butt from 2010. So even with that sherry cask in there, if you revert back to batch number 1, that sherry cask really added a lot of body to it. This one retains that lovely lightness to it. And the 100% Islay's is a limited release that we do each year. And this is a similar makeup to the latest bottling that we've done. And at that age, when we released this in 2019, it was, had a lot of age to it. And those single 100% Islay casks, it doesn't make up a huge amount of our production. Probably in the region of 25 to 30% is from our own barley, but it is something that is very special. And we are now in the process of trying to drain more fields on the farm so that we can grow a little bit more barley. And I believe this is publican barley that went into this bottling from back in 2008. And it has got that. People who are familiar with 100% Islay releases that we've done before will put their nose in there and get that classical freshness and the maritime salt coming out of it.
I think back in those days, we didn't put it on the bottle necessarily what barley it was, but because we had the one still house, so we kept 100% Islay and put out the malting separate. The 2 places where we get our barley and distilled them separate, but we didn't have the ability to, that we do now with 2 separate stills, 2 separate spirit safes to really separate them. And as George mentioned, the different types, this one was publican back in 2008, but now we grow 2-3 different types every year, and we can separate them out each year. So this year, was it last year we grew Sassy and Concerto, I think?
Yeah.
And we could distill them separately through distills. And even just through distillation, the Concerto had that real, I guess, typical citrus fresh note to it. And then actually when you distilled the Sassy, it came through as a little bit creamier. So we now have that ability, which is quite exciting for us really. Going forward, we're going to grow 2-3 different types every year, and we're going to be able to distill them separately and have 100% Islay that is all from our own barley, taken through malting, peating, distilling, everything up to bottling as maybe a Sassy variety and then maybe a Concerto variety, and you can tell the difference between those. And that's what we're looking forward to being able to do, I guess, going forward. And being, I guess, Islay's only farm distillery, doing that on site is great for us, and we have that flexibility. Even in Scotland, there's being able to be a farm distillery and have that control is great for us. I think we're going to do a lot more with that. I guess we probably do both ends. We do the farm side of things with different varieties, different fields, and grow at the front end, and then at the back end we do quite a lot of experimenting with different casks. People here might have seen the port, Madeira, Sauterne, whatever else it might have been, red wine, cognac cask, Calvados cask, we've all done maturations in. So it tends to be the sort of either end that we do most of our experimenting at Kilchoman.
Yeah, I mean, I think that especially when it comes to the barley varieties and distilling it's great to taste them as a spirit. What's going to be the most interesting part is when they start maturing in casks, and see if that differential comes through as well. Then, since our dad has taken a bit more of we can say this now because we probably know he's not watching, but he's taken a bit more of a back step when it comes to the sales side of things. He really does enjoy.
You really like that?
No, I'll probably get a message in a second, won't I? He takes a lot more into, his background being wine and then being in the wine trade and then an independent bottler. He really now does enjoy getting into the warehouse with Robin, the production manager, and going through and tasting the casks and planning what different casks he buy. So that's something he really enjoys doing. So it'll be interesting for him to be able to see if the changes of barley variety goes through when you've matured it as well.
I'm unsure whether 100% Islay is always one of my favourites. I think a few of the people commenting it's their favourites as well. And I think it's just the maltiness, whether it's just because we know it's a farmyard, but that farmyard feel, the maltiness, it is a very different character to the Portella maltings, obviously malted on Islay, but that we buy in. And it's always one of my favourite drams, the 100% Islay, just because of that sort of light, very light sort of peat, the light smoke saltiness, but you get this real malty sweetness with barley sugars to it, which is great.
I see a question in there about experimenting with yeast, and that is again something that we've started doing in the last few years. We've always used Mary's distiller's yeast up until we still do as our main yeast variety. But we have started experimenting with that, and again, I think it was 2019 at the Fèis that there was a tasting with Dave Broom and our dad that was purely going through different yeast varieties with new make spirit and seeing how it impacts the flavor profile of the spirit. So all these little experiments that we're doing is all down to having that second still house. Having two still houses now means that we can have a little bit more chance to experiment with those things, because we feel that the experimental side of not only distilling but casks, so we've got tequila and mezcal casks, for example, in the warehouse, and that having that chance to mature in these casks is exciting.
Yeah. And good to there with the nice palate of the barley with tropical fruits, nutty, short finish, but great dram. I think that's probably where some of the smoke comes in and some of the power of the peat comes through on the other drams helps with that finish. But certainly with 100% Islay, I think that you've nailed it there with that tropical fruit side, and you certainly get the palate of the barley and the maltiness coming through. And I've also noticed, George, you've managed to get your lighting a lot better than I have. You've got a dark hue, sort of tan lighting. I look very pale. It's not.
Yeah, you do. You look a bit ill, actually, don't you?
I know. I need to change up. It must be the strip lights in here. I obviously need to change them up a little bit. You probably got one of those selfie cameras that looks.
No, no selfie camera here. Just obviously a lot more healthier than you.
And maybe it's all that food. But yeah, hopefully a few of you on from. So we got a few shows, and we mentioned at the start about the visitor centre not visiting us, and we've had the visitor centre closed for a while, but we've now got the distillery open, but also we can travel a bit more. And I think Anter, who is a Kilchoman ambassador, has been in a few countries, Sweden and Belgium maybe recently, and Catherine's off to Belgium again soon. I think I'm off to Oslo in a week's time, and Netherlands for the Whiskey Live Hague there. So if you are going along to any of those shows, come along and give us a visit. Unfortunately, we won't have the Comraichs there for you, but we might have another few drams for you. And I think there's a few more questions. Might a Kilchoman ale ever be a thing? We have actually sold some barley to a few beer companies around, and some casks actually. So we did barley for the Islay ales, so a brewery on the island. We sold some malted barley too at one point. we also sent some casks over to Norway actually to mature some ale in for a little bit and release a beer. So we've done a few things, but unfortunately, I don't think we'll ever be doing a beer. We might be good at making whiskey. Well, we think we're very good at making whiskey anyway. But I don't think our beer would be up to standard. So we'll leave it at whiskey for now.
The Fèis, as I'm sure a lot of you are aware, the Fèis for the last 2 years has been cancelled, so it's been online. And I'd imagine our program will be released in about March, normally about March, April time, that the Fèis committee releases the lineup for things. But hopefully we'll be able to welcome you all back to the distillery and have a good party again, and we won't have to do these online tastings. But these online tastings have been great because it's sort of Thursday evening, open yourselves up to a larger audience, which has been good. I don't think we thought we'd still be doing them when our brother and dad started doing them back in March or April last year. But no, they've been good.
Dates for next Fèis, George, you know them off by heart?
I'm hoping Catherine, who works at the distillery, is see, look, she's there, she's on it. Luckily there's someone else who's far more organized and knows what's going on rather than just us two.
And could we already have some information about the forthcoming club release? Yes, if I can remember what casks are going in there. So we have that the club release. There will be a club release this year. So those club members, it's for those who aren't club members, for those who are, it's a sort of free to join on our website, and you can be a member and various sort of discounts and things. But the main thing is obviously we send out a club email with all our latest releases and things. And we do one release a year, which is probably the biggest perk. We do at the end of the year a club release, and we're going to do that this year. It's in the diary for the end of November, start of December. We're gonna do it. So we'll announce that fairly soon. And if I remember correctly, I was actually writing the labels this morning, so I should remember correctly. Yeah. It's a refill Oloroso hogshead. So 3 refill Oloroso hogsheads from 2008. So actually, some of the oldest casks we've done, as George mentioned, 2007 back there, but 2008. So 13-year-old. Refill hogsheads. So they're quite interesting because we usually mostly first fill with our sherry casks, but these are refill casks. So they've developed a little bit slower, but 13-year-old entirely in Oloroso sherry and from Portela maltings. So they've got that sort of higher ppm at 50, so a higher peating level, but one of our older sherry casks. So it's a pretty interesting dram. So that should be a good one. But we'll send out the information for all that pretty soon. Don't you worry.
I'm impressed you managed to remember that, considering when we were at the distillery.
I've been working today, George. I've been doing labels and doing other things. I've been busy.
Yeah, very busy. Catherine's put the dates up there for the Fèis, so the 27th of May to the 4th of June, and hopefully we'll be fully open.
And again, a fortunate question, because these are the questions that I've been looking at recently. So this is very handy. And actually, the experimental casks we got coming up. So we actually filled a few in the last few months of Amarone. Now I forget the other ones. Mori, and there is another one that I forgot. Masala as well. Yeah. So we've got those 3 cask types that we've not released, never have matured in, but we've filled a few of those recently. So they'll be coming out over the next few years at some point. But we've got certainly a few maturing that we haven't released yet, that's for sure. As I said, we sort of experiment at either end. We love experimenting with the cask types, we love experimenting with the farm and on the barley varieties and different fields and things. So you'll certainly always see different cask types coming out from us, but I think the Masala and Amarone are certainly a few that are coming up that'll be quite interesting to try.
Bottle shortage, yeah. I mean, it is something that we've been experiencing recently. It's great to have our own mold. So we've got our own starter bottle there, which is unique to us with the large bottle, and it has meant that we've had a slight delay in our glass supply, and that has meant there's been a knock-on effect with releases. We're hoping that we're nearly through the back of it, and by November we'll be be able to continue as normal, but it hasn't meant that we've had to stop shipping orders. It's just meant that we've concentrated more on our Maccabee and Sanic for around the world, and it has meant there's been a bit of delay on other releases. But it's something that is out of our hands. It's been very frustrating, but we've continued to bottle whiskey, which is the main thing.
Fortunately, we planned well enough that we didn't run out. So we've got plenty in the warehouse. So we just had to push back a couple of releases, but no, we can keep putting whiskey in bottles. Don't worry, it'll keep coming out to. I'm going to guess the name from Thomas is from Germany, so don't worry. There'll be plenty of whiskey coming out to Germany in Kilchoman bottles soon enough. And I actually forgot that we have Comraich batch number 4 to go through as well. So I've just thought myself that at the moment, and it's quite similar to the previous one. So George has done batch 1 and 3. I've done 2 and 4, and 2 and 4 are similar in many ways, because batch 2 was 2011 cast but released as an 8-year-old, and now we've got batch 4, which is 2011 cast but released as a 9-year-old. So it's bourbon barrels again, fresh bourbon cast, released as a 9-year-old. So an extra year there. It's 55% ABV, so a little bit lower, but not too much. So again, you're getting a lot of those similar characteristics coming through on this dram. And I think, as mentioned before, those we're sort of going back to 50 ppm. So George was talking about there the 100% Ireland, which we grow our own barley. We peat ourselves in our kiln, but we get that to about 20 ppm, which is sort of light, mid-level peat. We're back up to now sort of more of a, our Beg actually, use a very similar peating level for their barley, but some of the things we've been talking about tonight, where we have very tall, thin stills, we have really long fermentation, longer than most in the industry, to get through a lot of that fruitiness, a lot of that light character. So actually, when you're nosing this, when you're tasting this, it's not a load of peat coming through. It's some of that vanilla from the ex-bourbon, which is typical of those casks. And I think the real Kilchoman side is that fresh fruit. It's all about fresh fruit, citrus, some sort of tropical fruit, but it's real sort of, for me, I always get orange peel is something I always get. That real intense sort of orange peel flavor, particularly on the nose. I think it does hold back some of that smoke on the nose as well. And when you taste this whiskey, when you have it on the palate, a little bit more of that peat comes through when you really taste it.
No, it's got that really sort of. I always, when I taste especially the bourbons, you get that sort of fresh fruit, so the sort of ripe fruits, and then when you go more into the sherry influence with the Kilchoman, you get more of the cooked fruit character coming through as well. But I think the one thing that, for me, has been amazing is the cask strength whiskies. We're just drinking cask strength whiskey, which is a great thing to be able to do. Is drink cask strength whiskey that puts you in complete control of your dram, so you can add water to your own personal palate, which is great. And releasing cask strength really does highlight the distillery, not only the work the guys do in the still house, but also the quality of the wood. So there's very little hiding place, especially at these relatively young age of that cask strength. So
I think that's what we're sort of almost a bit proud of, is we're not pretending this is 21-year-old whiskey. This is a 9-year-old fresh bourbon cask, but it's not too harsh, it's not aggressive. There's a load of character there, that milk chocolate sort of smoky, fruity finish, and we can't be happy with. It's packed full of character, which was the whole idea from the start. And it's a bit of a gamble. I don't think my dad could ever claim to know exactly what flavors were coming out or exactly the taste, but we try to do every step: the growing, steeping, malting, peating, mashing, everything. Tried to do it as best we could with the help of Gin Swan, who was a great help for us. But it was all about trying to produce the best whiskey we could, and this was the style we wanted. And this is a really good example of that 9-year-old fresh bourbon cask. And I think my dad would even admit that I'm not sure he imagined it would be quite like this when it was 9 years old. But it's a really good example of Kilchoman in this.
No, especially when you're tasting these fresh casks, they're almost coming into from the age of, we always sort of believe that they're starting to come into their prime, the age of 8 years up into probably 12, 13-year-old. That's when these fresh bourbon barrels are coming into their prime.
Terry's chocolate orange. That's a good shout. That's exactly what it comes through on.
Is that
No,
is that
well
your
done.
new tasting note? Is it?
Yeah.
But no, it is, and we single cask and cask strength whiskey is something that we've always released. We've always done single cask for whether it's specific markets around the world or in the UK for shops, and it is a great way of showcasing your true distillery style, which is
a few questions coming in now. So about Springbank, who've announced they're no longer shipping individual bottles and boxes. Yeah, no, it's something that obviously everyone's aware of at the moment in terms of the environment and do we need boxes, and whiskey is one of the only industries where cartons, boxes, packaging is a prerequisite really, and we've thought about no boxes. It's something we may bring in. The only issue we have is trying to get the information across, because obviously with the whiskey there's we want to let everyone know that there's what barley it was, where it was farmed, what ppm it is, how many casks went into it, what strength, all this information, and trying to, obviously the box helps with fitting all that on. So that's one of the things we want to obviously get on the box. We have actually got these QR codes now. I don't know if you've got one of the bottles maybe at home that's Maccabee and Stanley. We've got QR codes on now. So if you scan those bottles, those labels, it actually brings up more information. You can go to a little portal where it tells you about the peating level, the availability, tasting notes. You've got videos on the tasting notes of it and how it was made. So there's a lot more information. So that's how we're hoping to try and get it across. So I wouldn't be surprised yet in a few years' time we may well go down that same route. And it's just about really finding a way where we can get all the information to you as well as not have a box. So it's certainly something we're thinking about.
And just to answer, there was a question I think that was coming in about the birds and the wildlife on the farm. We can assure you that is something that we work very closely with the RSPB to make sure that we keep the environment how it should be. We've erected 4,000 meters of fencing in the last 2 years to protect areas so the cattle can't go and graze them. And any work that we've done, the choughs are still very much a fixture at Kilchoman and can still be seen. So it is something that we work with, and you still very much see the corncrake. So we work closely with not only Nature Scotland but also the RSPB to make sure that anything that we're doing as far as draining fields or looking to grow more barley, we're doing it in the best way for the environment, which is something that Islay Heads, our general manager, really works closely with them to make sure we're doing it in the best way for everything. Who uses the farm? I mean, it's not just us that uses the farm for barley, but it's the wildlife that's there as well. And anyone
we're being a farm distillery, we use the draft. So once we've drained all the sugars off the barley, we obviously malt it to get as much sugars into the barley. We drain that off, and for production, then obviously we're making alcohol with that sugars. But the draft that's left has some nutrients in it, and we take that off to the barn opposite us, and that's feed for the cows. With the effluent, so once we've distilled through our stills, there's the effluent that's left. We spread that on the fields because that helps as fertilizer. It brings nutrients back into the field. So we're well aware we run a farm as well as a distillery. So it's very much front and center of our mind is what goes on at both ends. As George mentioned, Islay Heads is in charge of a lot of that stuff. So he's the man to talk to if you're ever concerned. Phone Islay Heads at the distillery. He'll tell you all about it. Triple distillation. So talking about triple distillation, it's not something. So obviously, a lot of time Irish distilleries and Irish whiskey is known for its triple distillation. That slightly lighter sort of character that comes through with doing that. It's not something we're thinking about. Part of being on Islay is the brand of Islay whiskey is so huge around the world. We wanted to very much be an Islay distillery, which is having that slightly peaty, smoky side to it. Maturing on Islay, growing barley on Islay. So we really want to be an Islay distillery as much as we can, and the character that comes with doing it in that way. So not something on our radar at the moment. You never know in the future, but I think we'll be sticking with the way we do it at the moment for now. Source of bourbon barrels, no, not a secret. George has been talking about that a bit tonight, where we source our bourbon barrels from Buffalo Trace Distillery in Kentucky. So all our fresh bourbons come over from there, and we source them all from there. So So no secret. We're actually pretty proud to get them from Buffalo Trace. We do sort of 3 grades as well. We try and get the top there, where it's, I think, George T. Stagg casts, those sort of high-end casts, and it's certainly no guarantee, whether it's you get a Chateau de Kemp's Saturn, or you get a Buffalo Trace sort of George T. Stagg cask, or Weller cask from bourbon, or you get whatever it might be from different areas around the world. Getting a good cask doesn't guarantee a good whiskey, because it's got to marry well with your type of spirit and for how long you mature it for. But certainly getting good wood from somewhere it's been treated well will make a difference to your whiskey, and that's what we try and do. So yes, it's Buffalo Trace where we get ours from.
And the question about the water, we get all our water from on site, and it goes through various filters and UV to make it usable not only in production but also for the visitor centre, etc. So we do get all that. And one thing I before I forget to mention, that we will be doing, last year we did a Christmas tasting, and we'll be doing another one of those. The date hasn't quite been shored up yet, but as soon as we have finished the packs, we will release those and also tell you the date for those. And Peter mentioned that the club release, dram will be in the tasting pack, along with Madeira cask matured. The release that was planned for this year has been slightly delayed, but you'll be able to taste that alongside our Maccabee and Sanic. So that will be at some point between Christmas and New Year. I'm not sure which one of us will be doing it, but
Christmas, it might not be George. George will be getting stuck into the Christmas dinner at that point. It might be being James on that one. George will be on the pigs and blankets too much for that.
Yeah, well, you don't want to miss out on this.
Our last question there, before we leave you, will be your flat pack barrels a necessity in the near future because of the shipping costs these days. It's certainly something it's on our radar. I mean, what was it? 3 years ago, it cost probably $100 to rent to have a shipping container. It's now over $1,000, to have a shipping container. It's certainly increased rapidly. But something we wouldn't do is ship flat pack or broken down casks. Some bigger distilleries or cooperages will break down the casks in America, ship them over to Scotland, recooper them, and then fill them with their spirit. But for us, a key component of was a lot of these whiskeys tonight has been, they're called fresh bourbon or fresh sherry casks that they've gone into. So day one, when you fill them, they're taking on that character of the wood. If you break them down and ship them, they're drying out that a little bit. When you fill them up, they're not so fresh, they're not wet on the inside. It takes that a little bit longer. So part of Kilchoman's whole character is down to these fresh casks. We spend, it costs a little bit more money to ship whole casks with nothing inside them. But when we get them, that benefit is huge. There's a lot of the character coming through on this dram here. The Comraich Batch 4 is down to that fresh wood. So we will never compromise that. It's always going to be shipped as whole casks. Hopefully the cost doesn't go up too much. Is the answer to that one. But
I think especially back in the early days when we were, when the distillery was built and we were looking, it was key that we not only distilled a style of spirit, but filled it into a style of cask that would give us the best opportunity to be able to release a younger style of whiskey. And that has been key to getting Kilchoman to where we are now.
Yeah. But I don't want to interrupt you, George, but I think we're nearing on an hour now, and hopefully everyone's enjoyed it. We'll finish up now, and we've done the 4 Comraichs. Hopefully they went down very well. Subtle differences, I think, tonight. Sometimes we do tastings where they're entirely different casks, and there's huge differences. Tonight was probably about more subtle differences between the character, between the taste, slightly different ages or strengths. But hopefully they've all gone down pretty well for you, and get yourself along to a Comraich, because as I said, we team up with some of the real sort of knowledgeable bars and the best bars we can really find that know Kilchoman pretty well. So you can, fingers crossed, rely on their barman to know exactly what you're tasting and which Kilchoman release it is. But thanks for joining, and we'll see you again soon. But George looks like he's got another.
Well, no, just because the questions that anyone who's been watching on Facebook, the questions, if we've missed any questions, we will be able to see them and catch up with them. But if you've been on YouTube and we haven't managed to answer your question, do message the distillery on whether it's Facebook or Instagram, or even just email info@kilchomandistillery.com, and someone will get back to you and answer your question, whether that be about the tasting this evening or anything else.
Good admin, George. Well done.
Yeah, well, at least someone's in control here. You got to have a steady hand at the top.
That's right. Well, Cheers, everyone.